All right, kids, here we go. So tonight's video actually comes to us as a request from Michael Valentine, who left a comment on the other video that I did showing you how to do a 3-2 pull down or a telecine process. Now, for those of you that may not have seen that video, what that entails is taking a 24 frame per second cinematic video file and converting that into an interlaced format such as it will be broadcast on television. So in North America, we broadcast in 29.97, which is an interlaced file format. And you actually have to do this process of telecine or pull down to smoothly convert 24 frames a second or 23.976 if you prefer to that frame rate so that it doesn't jitter. Because if you just do a straight convert, it looks jittery and jerky and it just looks terrible. Now, Michael asked me, how do I do the reverse of that? How do I take a file that's already in 29.97 and remove it so that it's a proper 24 frame or 23.976 file? Because I'm tearing my hair out and I can't actually edit in 24 because the camera has chosen to record it. So for those of you that haven't run into this problem, you might be asking, well, why would you want to remove it? Well, I'll tell you why, and it's very important. Some cameras will not actually record natively in 24 frames a second. What they'll do, for various technical reasons to save space because of the way that the file is written on whatever, writing format that the camera uses, basically what they'll do is the camera will actually record in 29.97 technically, but it'll film in 24 but actually record it as 29 so that it imports already ready so that you don't have to do a telecine process, because according to the camera manufacturers that makes things easier, right? Wrong. It's a huge pain in the ass if that's the camera that you have, because you're trying to basically take interlaced footage that looks like progressive footage. So if you have to do post or anything like that, it's a huge pain in the ass, because you're basically having to do your graphics and all your editing in a completely different frame rate, and it makes it look cheap. So you'll see in the 90s, you'll see shows like Xena Warrior Princess or Hercules or Sinbad and a lot of those kind of Saturday morning serial shows from the 90s like I grew up watching. And if you watch those shows, one of the things that you'll notice is that the titles look really, really smooth, but the footage itself is filmic. And sometimes when they'll add visual effects or fairly early CG computer graphics, it looks smooth, but the footage looks filmic and it makes it look a little bit incomplete, and the compositing is weird. Now, the reason that happened in the 90s was because if you shot something on film and you did visual effects shots and then you had to output back to videotape, the budgets to go to a DI or digital intermediate were really, really expensive. And because most people at that time wouldn't notice, they would just composite digitally, so it would actually be in the wrong frame rate. But what happens is it makes it look a little dated and it makes it look weird. That's just an example of the kind of thing that you'll see. So too do we run into the same problem with this sort of thing. So the Canon HV20 is a pretty popular camera, and for good reason. It's fairly compact, the picture quality is reasonably good, and it's a good little camera. I mean, Canon doesn't make crap, but the problem is it shoots in this 24 frame per second frame rate, but it does that thing where it conforms to 29.97, making it really, really difficult to work with. So this is how we fix it. So the first thing we're going to do, as always, is we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Import, and then we're going to go File again, or Control I if you prefer. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to actually take Michael's file, Goon Fight Getting Into It. You know what? I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Krav Maga both of which are martial arts and fighting systems specifically designed to keep goons from beating the crap out of you. So I am totally down with that. So we're going to actually import this puppy right in here. All right, so that sucker's in there. So now we can see in this footage, we can see that it's actually not the frame rate that we actually want. It's actually 29.97 frames per second. We don't want this. We want to change that to 24 or 23.976. But as I said, you can't actually convert it straight because then it looks jittery and it's terrible and it looks like shit. So that's why we're doing this process. And before I go any further, the reason that I'm in Creative Cloud showing you how to do this is because there's an extra step to be able to do it in CS6 if you have an older version of After Effects. The video file type that the Canon HV20 uses, CS6 can't read, so we have to convert it so that it'll load. So just for simplicity, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So if you've got an older version of After Effects, don't worry, got you covered. But just so that you can see the mechanics, I'm going to show you the process in After Effects Creative Cloud. I have 2015 running because it works for me. And it's the exact same process in CS6. As I say, there's just one more step we have to do in order to get it in there. So without further ado, so now I have my footage here. And this is where the magic happens, okay? So we're going to right-click on this guy, and we're going to go down to Interpret Footage. And then we're going to go to Main, or Control-Alt-G if you're a shortcut ninja. So now we have all this intimidating, fancy-dancy, gobbledygook crap. But the good news is most of this crap we don't need. Which is always good because anytime you can simplify the process, the better off you are, because frankly working in television and video is complicated enough and we don't really need to add anything to it, do we? Yeah, I didn't think so. So the first thing we're going to do is under the fields and pull down section, which is right down here, we are going to click Preserve Edges. And the reason we do this is because sometimes you get little jaggies and things like that when you're converting. And we don't want that. We don't want motion jaggies. We don't want artifacts. We don't want anything that's basically going to fuck up the footage that we have. So this is not something that we want to contend with. So we are going to preserve edges in best quality. The next thing we're going to do is see this little big gray, dark gray, turning black button when I hover over it. Type button thing where it says Guess 3, 2 pull down. That's actually what we're going to hit because that is actually going to give us the motion cadence so that it can actually remove the pull down. So we're going to click on that. We're going to let it go and voila! See? So now we know that WWWSS is the motion cadence for the Canon HV20. And the cool thing about this is that it is also giving us our effective frame rate because it knows it's 23.976 and we're off to the races. So now we can hit OK. But before I hit OK, in CS6, because we're dealing with the Canon HV20, if CS6 can't guess, and it won't be able to guess, and we'll go into that in a minute when I actually launch CS6 and go through the same process. We already know that it's WWWSS. Most people asking are using the Canon HV20, and so you can do this manually, and it will work on any version of After Effects that you are trying to do this with. So, it's guessed correctly. Remove pull down, WWWSS, which is the fourth one down. See? And now we're going to hit OK. So now what you'll notice is that the 29.97 in this place where my cursor is gone. It's actually correctly changed it to 23.976, which is awesome. That's exactly what we want. So now what we can do is we can actually create a composition and get this puppy on ice. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on our goon file and we're going to right click and we're going to go new comp from selection. So now we can see we are in the correct frame rate. So now what we're going to do, we'll just double check it. So we'll go up to composition, go composition settings, or Control K if you prefer. And right here, we can see that our frame rate is 23.976. And the aspect ratio is a 133. And we are good to go. This is what the file that we have been provided is. And we're going to hit OK. So now what we're going to do is we are going to export this. So to do that, we're going to go to, again, we're going to go to composition, and we're going to go to add to render queue, or Control M if you prefer. And then we are going to check our settings. We actually don't need to worry about this just yet. We're going to go to lossless. So see there where it says lossless. I'm going to change my format, as always, to QuickTime. I'm going to make sure that I'm in the animation codec, which gives me the maximum amount of juice to work with for post. I'm going to hit OK. Everything else looks good. In this case, I'm going to output the audio. I'm not sure if this is mono or stereo that's been recorded, so you will know based on your footage. For the purposes of this, I'm going to say audio output on and stereo. You will change it depending on what you have your footage set at, because you are the one that recorded your footage, so you'll know the best. You'll know yourself if it's better in stereo or mono, because you'll know if you recorded it in stereo or mono. I'm actually getting a little ahead of myself here. So so there's my output, everything looks okay, and then I'm going to output. I click on that, and then I'm going to save my file name. That looks good. I might change that to 24, and then I'm going to hit save. I've already made a version of this, but I'm just going to hit replace, and then I'm going to hit render, and then let it go. And that's how it's done. So I'm just going to cancel that because this isn't really something we need to concern ourselves with. You get the general idea. But that's how it's done. If you do that, it's absolutely correct, and you'll be able to deal with your footage. And if you need to change your aspect ratio a bit or pull it, you can do that in Premiere pretty easily, because I can see from the way that the footage has been shot, it's been treated by the Canon as if it's sort of quasi-anamorphic. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing in CS6. So if I open up CS6 here, so now I have CS6. This is the same thing. So this is actually what I want to show you. So if I go and I take my goon footage, which I have here, so I'm just going to click and drag it just to show you. So let's say I take my goon fight original footage, and then I try to bring it into After Effects. Watch what happens. Oh my god! It doesn't fucking work! God, fuck it! Ah! After Effects error, file cannot be imported! Ah! It's damaged! It's damaged! No, it's not damaged. CS6 is just being a pain in the ass. Damaged? No. Unsupported? Yes. But you know what? That's okay, because we can force feed After Effects to do our bidding. And how do we do that, and what does it cost? Well, it costs the princely sum of 0. This is, or should be, every editor's secret weapon. And it's freeware, and it's saved my ass many, 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 many times. And it's called Handbrake. Now, I actually have Handbrake open already here. So Handbrake, if you don't have it and you don't know where to get it, I'm actually going to put the link in the below. It's freeware. I'm going to put it in the description below. And it is available at handbrake.fr. That's the web address to get Handbrake. And it works amazingly, amazingly, amazingly well. And it is... Technically, it's really designed in order to kind of squish stuff for the web. But as long as you give yourself enough juice to work with, it works perfectly fine for broadcast. And it saved my ass when I get deliverables from agencies or clients that are not super techy, and instead of me having to bug them and bitch that the footage is wrong or whatever and make them feel like shit, which I don't like doing, I can just quietly fix it and then they're all happy, right? Because I have this in my toolbox. So the first thing that we're going to do is I actually already have this. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to close Handbrake because I want you to see what happens when you first load it. So I'm going to just go and I'll take Handbrake and then I'll load it. All right, and we'll just let that go. Comme ça. All right, so the first thing that you're going to see is you're going to see this big gray rectangle. I know, exciting, right? So what we're actually going to do is, you can open a video file and you can do a batch scan, but for the purposes of what we're doing here, we're just going to drag it in there. So I'm actually going to go back to Mike's original goon fight clip, and I'm going to click it and I'm going to drag it. So what it's going to do now is it is actually going to see, so it sees it. Now right off the bat, there's a couple of things that we want to be sure of. First, we're going to make sure that our format is MP4, because this is a format that pretty much everything can understand, and that includes After Effects, right? Because the footage that the Canon doesn't understand, or the footage from the Canon, is what After Effects doesn't understand. After Effects CS6 doesn't understand. So we want to get it to a point where it does understand. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a manual override. So this first one is the summary pane. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move to, and it sees that it's a mono track. So I should have made that mono, but that's okay. You get the general idea. So now we're going to go over to the video panel, which is here. And we're going to do two things here. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to change this to constant frame rate. Because if it's not a constant frame rate, then After Effects can get confused when you're trying to remove the pull down. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to change our, I'm going ahead of myself a bit here if I'm going too fast. So the frame rate pane, right now, you can see that Handbrake is a little confused. It thinks it's 30 and it's not. We don't want it to do this because then it's going to go into After Effects, and even though it will see the clip, it'll conform it at the wrong frame rate, and we won't actually be able to do the pull down, and we'll be in the same problem that we were when we started. So what we're actually going to do to save ourselves a lot of aggravation is we're going to actually manually change our frame rate from 30 to 29.97. We're not going to do same as source because sometimes it tags things in a way that After Effects gets confused. So we are actually going to force it to conform to 29.97 manually, and we are going to make sure that it is a constant frame rate so that After Effects doesn't get confused in how we do this. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my file here. I'm just going to copy it so that I know where it is, Control C. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Start Encode, like so. Actually, I'm going to pick a different drive, I think, here, because it is getting a little low on space. It's kind of a redundant drive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it on my D drive, like so. Now I've already made a version of this file, so I'm just going to replace it. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the encode, and I'm going to copy this again because it's in a different place than I actually want it. So now I'm going to hit Start Encode and let it go. Yes, I want to overwrite it. Bloody hell. Computers, eh? They always want to babysit you. It's like listening to your fucking mother. I don't listen to my mother anymore. It's funny. You don't listen to your mother when you should, and then you listen to your mother when you shouldn't. Funny thing that. So this is a fairly short clip, and it's going really, really quickly. So it's just kind of buzzing along. I pretty much already kind of went click, click, click. So it's going, 73.68, and I'll let it go, and it's already done. See? So now what we're going to do, so now we have a clip that CS6 will actually see. So now we're in CS6. So what we're going to do is, as always, we're going to go File, and we're going to go Import, and then we're going to go File again, or Control I if you prefer. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste the location of my file, and it's importing. Haha, see, it sees it. So 29.97, there it is. So now we're going to more or less do the same thing, but we're going to change it up a little bit because we've had to actually convert our file into a way that CS6 understands. So we're removed a little tiny bit from the original file just in order to force CS6 to load it. So that means we have to do one other quick little modification, which I'll show you in a minute. But it's other than that, it's the exact same process. There is zero difference. So the way we do that, just like we did in After Effects Creative Cloud, we're going to right click on this in our panel. We are going to go down to Replace Footage. And again, we're going to go and click, or sorry, not Replace Footage, sorry, Interpret Footage. Where is my brain? We're going to go, we're going to go to Interpret Footage, and we're going to hit Main, which is Control-Alt-G, like so. And that brings up the same panel that we had before. So where things are going to change a little bit is After Effects CS6 is not going to be able to determine what the pull down is, because we actually had to convert the file to open it. A lot of that data that was in the original file from the camera is gone. So we have to tell it manually what pull down cadence that we want to use. But we know from we know from CC 2015 or any version of After Effects Creative Cloud, we actually know that, I'm just going back in here to show you, we know what the motion cadence is, which is WWWSS. And this is going to be the same for any footage that you get from the Canon HV20. It'll work. So we know that it's WWWSS. So I'm going to go back to CS6, and I'm going to click Preserve Edges under Fields and Pull Down, and I'm going to do the Remove Pull Down, and I'm going to change it to WWWSS, right? Because this is exactly the same as in here. So now what we're going to do is, and again, that's the fourth one from the bottom. So there's only one more under it. So we know that that's correct. So we're actually doing this manually. Not much, like we've got one or two other steps, but it will do it. And we will hit OK. Now, before I continue, this will work with the Canon HV20, and it will work with a lot of cameras. However, there is a caveat emptor here. If you have a camera that you don't know what the cadence is, then you need to kind of play around with it until you get the one that works. So if you have WWSS, which works for the HV20, it might not work for another camera type. But one of those will likely eventually work. You just might want to render out some test footage that's like 10 or 15 seconds. But generally, most of the cameras that you're going to have that you're going to run into this problem is going to be the motion cadence that you have just seen. So that'll get you out of pretty much any bind for the most part that you run into. But if you render it out and it looks choppy with a different camera, it just means you need to find the motion cadence, right? Because it does a good job guessing in general, but it's not perfect. So that's just something to keep in mind. But honestly, 90% of the people that are asking about this are asking about the Canon HV20. And there aren't a lot of cameras that you're going to see with this problem at this point. So that's done. And again, you can see that it's conformed to 23.976, which is what we want. And now we can create a composition and render this guy out. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on that in our project pane as always. And we are going to go down to new comp from selection. And just to be on the safe side, we're going to just go in a composition and just check to make sure that everything lines up. Control K, which you can use if you want. And again, we see it is the correct frame rate at 23.976. The original footage is basically DVC Pro in an aspect ratio that's kind of quasi anamorphic, that's squished. But that's very, very easy to change in post in Premiere. And that's probably not something I need to really go into. We want to keep it as close to the source file as possible. But you know what? If any of you have any difficulties, let me know, and I got a few quick fixes for that too. But for the purposes of the tutorial for today, we're just trying to get this to a point where we can work with it. So that all looks well and good. So we're going to hit OK. And again, we're going to go up to Composition, and we're going to go Add to Render Queue, or Control M, and we're going to just double check. So again, as always, we're going to go and change our format to QuickTime. We're going to make sure we're in the animation codec, although you can change it to any codec you prefer. I just personally like to use animation because it gives me the most amount of juice when I'm creating proxy files later. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check everything else. That looks okay. In this case, I'm actually going to want audio output. And I know that the file is mono, so I can change that to mono. And then I can leave that. So everything looks good to go. And I can check my render settings, just make sure all that stuff looks good. It's the right frame rate. Everything is fantastic. We don't need to worry about any of this other crap, so we're good. So now all we have to do is hit the render button, and off she goes. And there we go. It's a perfect, and you know, this is the footage, and our obviously our beautiful friend here, her head is a bit squished because of the aspect ratio, but that's okay because obviously once it gets edited in post, that's very, very easy to change in Premiere or whatever editing software that you are using. And you generally don't want to dick too much with what the camera settings are. Get the file and the frame rate you want and moving properly first. And as Red Green would say, it's just that simple. Or it's just that easy. So that is, if you have any issues with Canon HV20, that is how you deal with it, and it will fix it every single time. And you will be able to edit to your heart's content in a 24 frame per second timeline, and pretty much Bob's your uncle. That's really all there is to it. And the cool thing is, and then when your project's finished and you might later on have to go to broadcast, then you can just kind of go the reverse and put the pull down back on top of it. But this is how you do it, and hopefully that helped you out. And as always, if any of you have any questions, please do leave them in the comments. I do see them all, and I do respond to them all. And if anybody's having any difficulty or something's a bit confusing, by all means, drop me a line. I will do my best to respond to it as soon as I can. And the other thing that I also wanted to add is that if anybody has anything that they have a suggestion for a tutorial for something that they're having a hard time with in Premiere or After Effects or, you know, Audition or any of those pieces of software, again, by all means, please leave a comment. If there's anything you're having a hard time with and it's something I can help with, I'll make a tutorial on it. You know, because we're all video editors, we're all production people here, and it's very easy to feel stupid. And the thing is these programs are, you know, they're very sophisticated and they're very complicated, but it's not kind of like the old days where everything was hardware. It's a computer, and computers have kind of gremlins and greeblies and things like that that can cause things to kind of go cockeyed and weird. And so my opinion is that you should never be afraid to ask for help. Some people are assholes about it. In my opinion, that usually means that they're just not a very good editor, and they're just not very good people in general. Because the thing is as a whole, we want to have the highest quality content possible, and none of us are going to get anywhere if nobody learns how to do it properly. So it's better for us all to kind of push each other up, and this is one of the things that I enjoy about doing these videos, because a lot of these things are pretty convoluted, but the actual solutions for a lot of these problems are simple. There isn't really anywhere that is explained or described, and then and honestly, Adobe's so-called technical support is useless. They outsource all this stuff to God knows where, and no disrespect to the many fine people that are working at these call centers, but they're not video people. They don't know what they're talking about half the time. And for what you pay for the software, and they keep jacking it up too. Like, it seems like every year I gotta pay another $20 for the fucking software. And I get that, yes, we're a post house and a lot of us are running post houses and it's in the budget, but just because you can get away with it and jack it up doesn't mean you should. There's a balance to it, and it's pissing a lot of people off, but whatever, it is what it is. So, fortunately, there's a lot of help out there, and I hope this helped you as much as possible. And if this helped you, or you enjoy any of the videos that we have on the channel, please hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate it, and I really enjoy hearing from all of you. I always enjoy hearing comments and things like that. The other thing that I might do is I might start doing some of these live, so that some of you can kind of follow along and talk to me as we go through these processes, because I have the ability to do that kind of a setup. So that might actually be pretty cool too. Something to think about. Anyway, so have a good one, and we will see you very soon. Very, very soon.